The evening had fallen gently over the small suburban town wrapping its streets in a calm golden haze. Porch lights flickered on one by one, children's laughter faded as families gathered indoors, and the world seemed to exhale into quiet. Inside a modest two-story house at the end of Willow Lane, Carter stirred a pot of soup while her 3-year-old daughter, Lily, hummed a tune to her stuffed bear. The air smelled of thyme and warm bread, the kind of simple peace cherished since marrying Officer Daniel Carter, the man she loved beyond measure. Daniel had been a police officer for 7 years, calm, strong, the kind of man who carried his sense of duty like a sacred oath. He was well known not just for his dedication, but for his partnership with Max, a black and tan German shepherd from the K-9 unit. Together, they were an inseparable pair, trusted by their department, respected by their community, and adored by one small girl who thought her father was the bravest man alive. Lily often waited by the window every evening, small fingers pressed against the glass, watching for the police cruiser that always rolled slowly up the driveway. When the headlights appeared, she'd squeal, "Daddy's home, Daddy's home," and run straight into his arms the second he opened the door. Daniel would scoop her up, kiss on the forehead, and say, "My 2 favorite girls in the world." But that night, the night everything changed, no headlights came. Glanced at the clock. It was 8:45 p.m., a little later than usual. Daniel had mentioned taking an extra patrol shift since another officer was sick. Still, something in her chest tightened with unease. She tried to distract herself, folding laundry while Lily built towers with her blocks. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and Lily's small voice asking, "When, Daddy coming?" "He'll be home soon, sweetheart," said softly, but her heart didn't believe it. Outside, rain began to fall slow at first, then heavy, drumming against the windows like a warning. Turned on the TV for background noise, flipping through channels until the local news caught her eye. The anchor's voice was calm but somber. "Breaking news tonight. A severe accident has closed Route 7 near Bridge. Early reports indicate a police officer may have been involved." The spoon slipped from his hand, clattering into the sink. Her breath hitched. Route 7. That was Daniel's route tonight. She froze, listening, but no names were released. The reporter's tone remained neutral, detached, a voice meant to deliver facts, not fear. But every word felt like a stone sinking into her stomach. She grabbed her phone and called Daniel. No answer. Once, twice, 3 times. Then she tried his partner, Detective Sarah Monroe, straight to voicemail. The silence between each dial tone grew unbearable. Lily noticed the change immediately. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Forced a smile she didn't feel. "Nothing, baby. Daddy's just busy at work." But her hands were trembling. She held Lily close, staring out the window as sirens wailed faintly in the distance, their blue and red lights flickering somewhere beyond the trees. An hour later, the knock came. It was soft at first, hesitant, respectful, the kind of knock that already knew it carried heartbreak. His legs felt heavy as she walked to the door, Lily clutching her hand. When she opened it, she saw 2 uniformed officers standing in the rain, hats in hand. Behind them, a patrol car idled silently. "Mrs. Carter," one began, his voice tight. His heart stopped. "Please don't say it," she whispered before he could continue. The officer swallowed hard. There was an accident tonight. Daniel was responding to a stranded motorist on Route 7 when a speeding vehicle lost control. He didn't make it. The world blurred. Sound collapsed into a dull roar. His knees buckled, and one of the officers caught her before she hit the ground. Lily began to cry, not fully understanding, only sensing that something terrible had happened. "No," gasped, shaking her head violently. No, he was just here this morning. He kissed us goodbye. He said he'd be home." The officer's eyes were wet. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. He saved the motorist's life. The impact was too sudden. There was nothing anyone could do." Rain poured harder, mixing with tears. Lily's sobs filled the doorway as thunder rolled in the distance. That night, the house that had once been filled with laughter became unbearably silent. Sat on the living room floor, clutching Daniel's uniform jacket against her chest. Lily, exhausted from crying, had fallen asleep curled beside Max's kennel. The K9 hadn't moved since the officers brought him home. He lay still, eyes open, staring at the front door as if waiting for Daniel to walk in. When reached out to touch Max, the dog lifted his head slowly and gave a soft, aching whine. It wasn't just the cry of an animal, it was the sound of a heart breaking. She buried her face in his fur, sobbing until she couldn't breathe. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. The soup on the stove had gone cold, untouched. The only sound in the house was the faint ticking of the clock and the rhythmic breathing of a sleeping child who still believed her father would come home in the morning. When dawn arrived, forced herself to stand. There were calls to make family, the department, the funeral home, but every word felt like lifting a mountain. She looked at Lily, still sleeping, her small hand gripping the corner of Daniel's folded flag from his locker. Knelt beside her and whispered, "Daddy, watching you, baby." That morning, the entire town learned what already knew. They had lost a hero. Flags across were lowered to half-staff. Flowers appeared on the steps of the police station. Strangers wept quietly and in the Carter home, grief lingered like a shadow that refused to fade. Yet even in the heaviness, something remained. Max began sitting by Lily's bed every night, refusing to leave her side. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, swore she could hear him make soft noises, as if responding to a voice only he could hear. And Lily, sweet, innocent Lily, would smile in her sleep and whisper, "Daddy, here." Would hold her breath, eyes welling up again, wondering if somehow, some way, her husband's spirit was still watching over them through the loyal eyes of his best friend. The rain finally stopped that morning, and sunlight filtered through the window. It glimmered against Daniel's framed photograph on the mantel, his smile frozen in time, his uniform crisp, his badge shining proudly. Beneath it placed Lily's small drawing of their family, Mommy, Daddy, Lily, and Max, all holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. In that picture, no one was missing. And as stood there, whispering a quiet prayer, she didn't yet know that this loss, this unbearable night, would one day lead to something extraordinary. Something that would bring an entire courtroom to tears. Something that would prove that love, loyalty, and innocence could speak louder than any witness ever could. Because sometimes, the smallest voices carry the greatest truths. The sun rose over the next morning, but the light felt dimmer, as if even the heavens hesitated to shine. The news of Officer Daniel Carter's death had spread like wildfire through the small town. For most, Daniel wasn't just another uniform. He was a familiar face, the kind of officer who waved at children on their way to school, helped elderly neighbors carry groceries, and treated his badge not as authority, but as a promise to protect. By noon, the police station was covered in flowers. Cards, candles, and folded flags filled the front steps. The American flag at half-mast fluttered in the autumn wind, a silent salute to the fallen hero. Officers who had worked beside Daniel stood in solemn silence, some openly crying, others too numb to speak. Inside the Carter home, grief had settled thick and heavy, a weight that clung to every corner. Sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee she couldn't bring herself to drink. Her eyes were red, her voice hoarse from endless tears. The world outside seemed distant, the hum of cars, the laughter of neighbors' children, all of it too normal, too cruelly indifferent. On the couch, little Lily played quietly with her toy police car. Her innocence shielded her from the full weight of loss. She didn't understand death. She only knew that Daddy hadn't come home and that everyone kept whispering around her. Occasionally, she'd turn toward the door and say, "Daddy, taking too long." Each time's heart cracked a little more. The phone rang constantly that day. Calls from Daniel's colleagues, the department chaplain, and well-meaning friends who didn't know what to say. Barely responded. Detective Sarah Monroe, Daniel's longtime partner, stopped by that afternoon. Her uniform was immaculate, but her eyes betrayed the sleepless night she'd endured. She said softly, stepping inside. I wanted to come by before the press does. The department's doing everything to catch whoever did this. Nodded numbly, clutching a framed photo of Daniel. He was helping someone. That's all he ever did, help. Why would anyone just drive away? Sarah's voice cracked. Because some people don't stop to see who they destroy. They sat together in silence. Outside, Max, the police dog, lay motionless on the porch, his head resting on his paws. Since the night Daniel died, Max hadn't eaten. He had refused water, toys, and even the touch of other handlers. Only when Lily came near would his ears lift slightly, as if recognizing something of Daniel in their scent. The department had offered to take Max back for reconditioning, but couldn't bear the thought. He's part of the family, she insisted. If Daniel trusted him, then so do I. Sarah nodded. We'll keep him on leave for now. He deserves time to grieve too. That night tucked Lily into bed early. The little girl clutched Daniel's police badge in her tiny hands. Sarah had brought it earlier, polished and gleaming, though its shine couldn't mask the tragedy it represented. Mommy, Lily asked softly, her voice barely a whisper, why are people sad about Daddy? Sat beside her, brushing her daughter's hair from her forehead. Because your daddy was very brave. He helped people even when it was scary. He made our town safe. Lily looked thoughtful. Will Daddy come home when it's safe again? The question sliced through like glass. She took a trembling breath, fighting the tears burning behind her eyes. No, sweetheart, Daddy, helping people from heaven now. Lily nodded slowly, her small mind trying to make sense of a world where fathers disappear. Then Max will find him, she said with certainty. Max is smart. Daddy said Max never gets lost. Smiled faintly through her tears. Maybe you're right. When Lily drifted to sleep, slipped out of the room and sank to the floor in the hallway. Max followed her quietly, his nails clicking on the hardwood. He sat beside her, resting his massive head on her knee. His brown eyes were full of something almost human, sadness, understanding, maybe even guilt. You miss him too, don't you, boy? She whispered. Max let out a soft whine, the kind of sound that seemed to carry everything words couldn't. Wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. In that moment, they weren't just grieving, they were surviving together. Days turned into weeks. The funeral was held at Mary's church, attended by hundreds. Rows of officers stood in uniform, their badges wrapped in black bands of mourning. The American flag draped over Daniel's coffin shimmered in the sunlight. The sound of bagpipes echoed through the streets, solemn and slow. When the chaplain spoke of Daniel's bravery, held Lily close. The little girl wore a white dress and held a small bouquet of lilies, Daniel's favorite flower and her own namesake. She didn't cry, perhaps because she didn't yet understand that this ceremony was forever. Then came the moment no one was prepared for. During the flag-folding ceremony, Max broke free from his handler's leash. He trotted forward, ignoring every command until he reached the coffin. The crowd gasped. Max sat beside it, pressed his head against the wood, and let out a low, aching sound that silenced everyone. Tears streamed down faces hardened by years of police service. Even the chaplain's voice trembled. It was as if Max himself was saying goodbye, the loyal partner refusing to leave the side of his fallen friend. Covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. Lily watched in awe, whispering, "See, Max found Daddy." After the service, the police department vowed to continue the investigation with renewed focus. Detective Monroe took the lead personally. Tire marks from the scene had been analyzed, and a piece of shattered glass found nearby was being tested for paint and fiber traces. There was hope, faint, but enough to keep going. Meanwhile, faced the quiet battle of rebuilding life without Daniel. Each morning she forced herself out of bed, made breakfast for Lily, and tried to smile. She visited Daniel's grave every Sunday, bringing Lily and Max along. Lily would leave a small toy car or a drawing beside the headstone, while Max would sit silently beside her, eyes fixed ahead, unmoving for minutes at a time. The community around the Carters, fundraisers, casseroles, offers of but rarely accepted. Grief made her stubborn. She didn't want pity, she wanted her husband back. One evening, as autumn deepened and leaves scattered across the yard, Detective Monroe stopped by again. "We've got a lead," she said, her voice cautious but hopeful. "A witness saw a black pickup speeding from Route 7 that night. We're tracing every vehicle that matches the description." Nodded, her expression a mix of gratitude and exhaustion. "I just want to know why, Sarah. Why someone would run away like that." Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll find out, I promise." When she left, stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker. Behind her, Lily giggled as Max rolled onto his back, finally responding to her playful pats. It was the first time had heard her daughter laugh since Daniel's death. For a moment, the heaviness in her chest eased. As the night grew darker, whispered to the empty room, "We're trying, Daniel, we're still here." And though she couldn't hear it, somewhere deep within the loyal heart of Max, there remained a silent vow, one that no one could yet understand. He hadn't just lost a master, he had lost a brother, and somehow he knew his purpose wasn't finished. The days after Daniel Carter's funeral were quiet in a way that felt unnatural. It wasn't just the absence of his voice or his laugh that haunted the Carter home, it was the stillness of things that used to move. His chair remained tucked neatly under the table, his mug still sat on the counter, and his patrol boots stayed by the door. Couldn't bring herself to move them. They were tiny reminders that he had once been there, that he might still walk through the door at any moment. But if anyone felt Daniel's absence most intensely, it was Max. Since the funeral, Max had stopped eating altogether. He lay for hours near Daniel's uniform, occasionally sniffing the sleeve as if hopping for a scent that was already fatting. At night, he paced by the front door, restless, tail lowered, ears alert to sounds that would never come again. The department had offered to take him back for retraining, fearing the K-9 might lose his discipline, but refused. "No," she told Detective Monroe firmly. "He belongs here with us. Daniel trusted him, I can't let him go." Sarah had nodded. "You're right, he was family." And so Max stayed. Every morning he followed from room to room, always a few steps behind her, quiet and watchful. But it was Lily who drew out something still living in him. She had taken to sitting beside him for hours, running her small fingers through his thick fur, whispering stories about her father. "Daddy said you were brave," she told him one afternoon, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "He said you could find anybody." Max tilted his head, as if he understood. Lily giggled, "Can you find Daddy?" Standing in the doorway froze, her throat tightened. She wanted to tell her daughter that Daddy couldn't be found, not in the way Lily imagined, but then Max did something unexpected. He got up, walked to the window and barked once, short and sharp, before sitting down again. Lily clapped her hands. "See, he knows where Daddy is." Smiled weakly through tears. "Maybe he does, baby." It was small moments like that which gave her strength to face each day. As autumn turned to winter, Max's behavior began to change. He was still somber but more alert. When the doorbell rang, he no longer whimpered, he barked with authority. When took Lily to the park, he walked beside the stroller like a silent guardian, scanning every direction as if still on duty. Sometimes strangers would stop and say, "Isn't that Officer Carter's K-9?" and would nod proudly. "Yes," she'd answer, "he's still part of the force in his own way." The community adored Max. The local paper ran a small story about him, calling him the dog who never left his post. Donations poured in to support the K-9 unit in Daniel's name. But beyond the sympathy and headlines, Max remained, above all, Daniel's shadow, loyal, steadfast, and still searching. One cold December afternoon, Detective Sarah Monroe visited with new updates. She removed her gloves and sat down, exhaustion etched into her features. "We've got partial fingerprints from the debris," she said. "We're close, Em. We might have a name soon." His eyes widened. "You mean they'll catch him?" Sarah nodded slowly. "We're working with the state lab. The driver who hit Daniel might been driving a stolen truck. We'll know more soon." Took a deep breath. The thought of justice gave her a glimmer of relief, but also reopened a wound she had tried to stitch shut. "I don't know what I'll feel when they find him," she admitted. "Anger, maybe, or nothing at all." Sarah reached out. "Whatever you feel, it'll be right. Daniel would want you to keep living, not just waiting." At that, Lily ran into the room holding one of Daniel's old hats. "Auntie Sarah, look, Max likes Daddy's hat." She giggled as Max gently took it in his mouth, careful not to tear it. He carried it to the couch, set it down, and rested his head beside it, almost as if he were guarding it. Sarah smiled, blinking away tears. Still the best partner he ever had. Nodded. "He hasn't let go either." Later that night, after Sarah left, sat by the fireplace, watching Lily and Max curled up together on the rug. The flames cast warm light across the room, painting everything in shades of gold. For the first time in weeks, peace didn't feel impossible. "Good night, Daniel," she whispered. In the following weeks, Max's loyalty only deepened. One morning, woke up to find him sitting by the window, tail wagging gently. It was strange. He hadn't done that since the night Daniel died. When she opened the blinds, she saw what he was looking at, a patrol car idling in front of the house. Detective Monroe stepped out, her breath visible in the cold air. Opened the door, heart racing. "They found him," Sarah said simply. "The driver, Mark, he's been arrested." Felt the world tilt. "Are you sure?" "Positive. He was repairing the same truck in another state. Same paint, same broken mirror. He confessed to being there that night." Didn't know whether to cry or collapse. Relief and rage twisted together inside her. She wanted to thank Sarah, to scream, to run, but all she could do was whisper, "Thank you." Max barked once, loud and commanding, as if he understood every word. His tail wagged hard for the first time in months. Sarah smiled faintly. "Guess he's ready for justice, too." In the days that followed, preparation for the trial began. Reporters called, neighbors stopped by, and people offered condolences again. But for everything blurred together. The only constant was Max, always at her side, quiet and strong. Sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, she would kneel by Max and whisper, "He'd be proud of you, you know. You kept us safe." Max would lift his head, look into her eyes, and press his nose against her palm as if to say, "I'm not done yet." It was around this time that Lily began drawing pictures again. One in particular caught attention, a sketch of their family, just like before: Mommy, Daddy, Lily, and Max. But this time, she had drawn a big heart around Daniel and Max, connecting them with a bright blue crayon line. "What's this line, sweetie?" asked. Lily smiled. "That's how they talk. Daddy talks to Max so he knows what to do." His breath caught. She wanted to tell Lily it was just imagination, but something inside her stopped. Because maybe, in some way, it was true. In the quiet before the trial, often thought about how Daniel had trained Max. She remembered his voice. He listens to every tone, every word. But most of all, he listens to hearts. Dogs always know. And as she watched Max follow Lily everywhere, guarding her, comforting her, never leaving her side, she realized Daniel had been right. Max wasn't just listening. He was waiting. Waiting for the day he could finish what his partner started. That day was coming soon. Winter had begun to fade from the small American town but the air inside the courthouse still carried the chill of sorrow and unfinished justice. Nearly 8 months had passed since Officer Daniel Carter's tragic death. 8 long months of grief, waiting, and questions that clawed at the hearts of everyone who had known him. Carter sat quietly on the wooden bench near the front of the courtroom, her hands folded around a handkerchief she'd been clutching since morning. Her dark eyes looked tired, framed by sleepless nights and endless prayers. Beside her, Little Lily sat in a small chair, swinging her legs softly, unaware of the storm that brewed around her. On the opposite side of the room stood Mark, the man accused of killing Daniel. His face was pale, a mix of guilt and arrogance flickering in his eyes. He wore a suit that didn't quite fit, his hands trembling as he fidgeted with a pen. Around him, his defense team whispered nervously, glancing toward the rows of uniformed officers seated in silent unity, a wall of blue there to honor their fallen brother. The prosecutor, a composed woman named Rachel Goodman, rose from her table. She was known for her precision, her words sharp as glass when it came to justice for law enforcement. "Your Honor," she began, addressing Judge, "this case represents not only the loss of an officer but the breaking of a family, a child's world torn apart by one man's reckless choice." Her voice trembled slightly on that last line. Even the most seasoned members of the court could feel the weight of those words. Closed her eyes. She could still hear the faint echo of sirens that night, the phone call, the disbelief, the sound of her daughter's soft crying as she whispered, "Where, Daddy?" She took a deep breath and opened her eyes again. Today wasn't about tears. Today was about justice. Detective Sarah Monroe, Daniel's former partner and best friend, took the stand first. Her uniform was crisp, her badge gleaming under the courtroom lights, but her voice cracked slightly as she recounted the night of the accident. "We found Officer Carter's vehicle parked along the highway's shoulder. He had stopped to assist a stranded driver. The suspect's truck approached at high speed, failed to slow down, and struck him before fleeing the scene." The defense attorney, a gray-haired man named Harold, stood. "Detective, you claim my client was driving that night. Yet, do you have any eyewitnesses placing him there?" Sarah met his gaze firmly. "Not direct witnesses, but we found fragments of headlight glass and paint matching the make and model of Mr.'s truck. When his vehicle was recovered, damage patterns matched the injuries sustained by Officer Carter." Nodded, feigning sympathy. "But without clear video evidence, we cannot be certain, can we?" The judge interjected, "Mr. The jury will determine certainty. Proceed." His heart thudded. She hated this part, the questioning, the back and forth that made Daniel's sacrifice sound like just another case number. To her, it wasn't a story. It was life torn in half. Meanwhile, Max, Daniel's police dog, waited in the courthouse hallway with his handler. Hadn't seen him yet today, but she knew he was there. She could always tell when he was close, that comforting energy that had once filled their home whenever Daniel walked in from a long shift. The handler, Officer Blake, gently stroked the German shepherd's fur. "You ready, buddy? They might call you in today," he whispered. Max gave a soft whine, eyes alert, tail still. Inside, the proceedings continued. The prosecution presented photographs from the scene. Shattered glass, skid marks illuminated by police lights, Daniel's badge lying near the pavement. The jury shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Then came the emotional testimony. Officer Monroe described the moments after finding Daniel. Her voice broke completely. He was lying beside the road. Max was barking, trying to nudge him awake. He wouldn't leave his side. We had to physically pull the dog away. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the jurors blinked rapidly, their expressions softening. Pressed her hand against her chest, her breath unsteady. She remembered that night too vividly. The call from Sarah, the drive to the hospital, the sterile smell of corridors, and the silence when the doctor came out shaking his head. When the court recessed for lunch, stepped outside with Lily. The little girl held a small toy police badge, rubbing it between her fingers. "Mommy," she asked innocently, "is Daddy coming today?" Knelt down, brushing Lily's hair from her face. "No, sweetheart, but we're here to talk about him. Remember what we said, Daddy was a hero." Lily nodded slowly, "Like Max." A tear slipped down his cheek. "Yes, baby, just like Max." As the afternoon session began, something unexpected happened. The prosecutor requested permission to bring in Max for testimony demonstration purposes. The judge raised an eyebrow. "This is unusual, counselor." Rachel Goodman stood firm. "Your Honor, this K9 was Officer Carter's official partner. His reactions may help the jury understand the emotional and behavioral connection in this case. The defense has been arguing lack of direct connection. This may help illustrate one." The defense objected. "Objection, a dog cannot provide testimony." The judge thought for a moment, then sighed. "Objection overruled. The court will allow the demonstration, provided it remains relevant and under control." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned forward, froze, her pulse racing. Moments later, the doors opened. Officer Blake entered with Max on a leash. The German shepherd moved calmly, but his eyes scanned the room with trained precision. The air seemed to thicken with emotion as he stepped onto the stand area. Lily gasped softly, recognizing him instantly. "Max," she whispered, clutching her mother's arm. Max turned his head toward the sound. For a brief second, his entire demeanor changed. His ears perked, tail wagging once softly. It was the first sign of life had seen in him since Daniel's funeral. "Officer Blake," the prosecutor said, "can you explain Max's behavior during and after the accident?" "Yes, ma'am," Blake replied. "After Officer Carter's passing, Max refused food for 3 days. He stayed by the door, waiting for his partner. When we brought him to the memorial, he sat facing the flag where Daniel's name was honored and didn't move for hours. He's one of the most loyal dogs I've ever handled." The courtroom grew silent. Even Judge Stern's face softened. Then something extraordinary happened. As Blake finished speaking, Max looked across the room again, directly toward Lily. The child's eyes sparkled with recognition. She pointed her tiny hand toward him. "Daddy's friend," she said softly, voice echoing just enough for the court to hear. A hush fell over the room. Every sound vanished, the rustle of papers, the creak of seats, even the ticking of the clock. People turned to stare at the little girl who had broken the silence with 2 simple words. His throat tightened. She tried to pull Lily close, whispering, "Baby," but it was too late. The moment had landed. The meaning was undeniable. Max tilted his head, then gently pulled away from Blake's grip. He walked steadily across the courtroom floor, his paws clicking softly against the polished tiles. No one stopped him, not even the judge. He reached Lily, sniffed her small hand, and then sat beside her. Quietly, reverently, he placed his paw on her lap, just as he used to do when Daniel came home. Broke down in silent tears. The jury watched, some visibly moved. The judge leaned forward, his voice low but sincere. "This court acknowledges the profound connection between this K9 and the Carter family. Proceed, counselor." Rachel nodded, her voice shaking slightly. "Your Honor, the prosecution rests for the day." As the session ended, people remained in their seats, unable to move. They had witnessed something that transcended logic, a loyal animal and a child, united in grief and truth. Outside the courthouse, as cameras flashed and reporters whispered about the emotional moment, held Lily close. "You did nothing wrong, baby," she murmured. "You just spoke your heart." And though she didn't fully understand, Lily smiled faintly. "Daddy's friend found us, Mommy." Looked down at Max, his calm brown eyes watching them both. Somewhere deep inside, she felt Daniel's presence again, not gone, but guiding them through this final chapter toward justice. The courtroom remained frozen long after Max laid his paw on little Lily's lap. The silence was thick, almost sacred, like the air before a storm. No one dared move, not the jury, not the attorneys, not even Judge, whose gavel rested motionless in his hand. Max's deep brown eyes stared up at Lily as if he understood something no one else did. His tail gave a slow wag, then stopped, his body calm and protective beside the tiny girl. Lily blinked, her small hand trembling as she reached out and stroked his head gently. "Daddy's friend," she whispered again, this time a little louder. The words carried through the chamber like a prayer. The entire courtroom seemed to exhale in unison, a mix of awe, sorrow, and something beyond comprehension. Pressed her fingers against her mouth, her heart pounding so hard she thought she might collapse. Every emotion she'd buried over the past month surged all at once: grief, love, hope, pain. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't look away. She couldn't. Judge finally cleared his throat, his usually steady voice soft. Let the record show that during this recess, the minor child made verbal contact with the K-9 unit involved in Officer Carter's service. He paused, and the animal responded. Nobody could define what that meant in legal terms, but everyone could feel what it meant in human ones. The prosecutor, Rachel Goodman, exchanged a look with Detective Monroe, who sat in the audience, visibly emotional. Monroe's chin trembled. She hadn't cried in public since Daniel's funeral. But seeing Max, that loyal dog, reunite with Lily was too much even for her hardened heart. The judge signaled a short recess to compose the courtroom. As people began to stir, remained seated, one hand resting on Max's fur, the other holding Lily close. When they were finally alone, knelt down. "You did something amazing, sweetheart," she whispered. "You reminded everyone who Daddy was." Lily looked puzzled. "Did I help Daddy?" Tears slipped down her cheeks as she nodded. "Yes, baby, you helped him more than you know." Officer Blake approached carefully. "Ma'am, we'll have to bring Max back for a short demonstration after recess." Nodded, wiping her eyes. "It's okay. He's always been ours, too." Blake smiled faintly, his voice low. "He remembers her, you can tell." When the court resumed, the atmosphere had changed entirely. The defense's earlier confidence seemed to have evaporated. Jurors whispered softly among themselves, glancing at Max, who now sat alert beside the witness stand again. Rachel Goodman stood tall. "Your Honor, the prosecution would like to continue the demonstration involving Officer Carter's K-9 partner." Judge gestured for her to proceed. "Continue, counselor." Rachel nodded to Officer Blake. "Please explain to the court how Max was trained to recognize scent associations, particularly in vehicular hit-and-run investigations." Blake adjusted his uniform. "Yes, ma'am. K-9 Max is trained to identify and alert on trace evidence, scent, residue, and material from specific scenes. When paired with forensic results, his behavior can help confirm the presence of a suspect at a location." Rachel continued, "And was Max used during the investigation of Officer Carter's death?" "Yes," Blake replied. "After the suspect's vehicle was found, Max was presented with samples from the scene, fragments from the car, and a piece of Daniel's uniform retrieved that night." Rachel's voice grew steadier, deliberate. "What was his reaction?" Blake hesitated for a second, emotion flickering in his eyes. "He sat immediately beside the uniform. Then he growled when he was shown the suspect's car door. That's his signal for recognition." A quiet gasp moved through the courtroom. The defense attorney rose quickly. "Objection, Your Honor. The court cannot use an animal's reaction as evidence of guilt." The judge leaned back. "Objection noted. However, the demonstration is admissible for contextual understanding, not as direct proof." Rachel nodded and gestured toward the evidence table. Two sealed containers were brought forward, one with residue from the scene, the other containing a small metal piece recovered from the accused's car. "Officer Blake," she said, "please allow Max to examine these under the same conditions as before." The handler knelt, releasing Max's lead just slightly. "Find," he said softly. The dog sniffed the first container, no reaction. Then the second. He paused, ears twitching, tail stiffening. After a moment, he sat down abruptly and growled, a low, rumbling sound that reverberated through the room. The jurors watched in stunned silence. The growl wasn't aggressive. It was instinctual, automatic, a clear behavioral cue. Rachel stepped back. For the record, that behavior is consistent with the reaction observed during initial testing. Blake nodded. Exactly, ma'am. The judge leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Officer Blake, is it your professional opinion that the animal has recognized the scent as the same from the crime scene? Yes, Your Honor. The defense attorney stood again, his voice slightly shaking. With all due respect, dogs can be unreliable. This doesn't prove my client's guilt. But before he could continue, something happened that silenced him mid-sentence. Max turned his head sharply toward the defendant. His ears pinned back and he began to growl again, louder this time, his body rigid. Easy, Max, Blake whispered, but the dog didn't move. His eyes were locked on Mark. The defendant froze, visibly sweating. For the first time during the entire trial, his false calm shattered. His hands trembled, his gaze darted to the door as if looking for escape. Judge struck his gavel lightly. Control your client, mister. But it was too late. His voice cracked as he blurted, "That dog's crazy, he doesn't know anything." The outburst drew gasps from the gallery. Rachel Goodman's expression turned steely. Your Honor, the defendant's reaction speaks volumes. The judge gave a firm nod. It certainly does, counselor. His hand trembled as she held Lily closer. She could feel Max's energy from across the room, focused, intense, yet purposeful. This was the same look Daniel used to describe whenever Max sensed danger or identified a target. After a long silence, the judge finally said, "Court will adjourn for the day. The jury is dismissed until tomorrow morning." As people began to file out, Max relaxed, returning to his calm, steady demeanor. He walked back toward and Lily, sitting by their side again. The courtroom's tension dissolved into quiet whispers. Detective Monroe approached, her voice soft. "I've seen a lot in my years, but I've never seen anything like that. It's like he knows what justice means." Smiled weakly. He does, he always did. Later that night, as tucked Lily into bed, she replayed the moment over and over in her mind, the growl, the silence, the panic in his eyes. It felt like Daniel had been there in that courtroom, standing beside Max, guiding him still. "Mommy," Lily murmured sleepily, "did Daddy see us today?" Brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, he saw everything." Outside the window, the streetlight flickered gently against the snow. Max lay at the foot of Lily's bed, his head resting on his paws, eyes half closed but watchful, as if guarding something sacred. For the first time in months, felt a strange peace settle over her heart. Justice wasn't complete yet, but it was coming. And she knew Daniel's spirit, through his loyal friend and their brave little girl, would see it through. The next morning, news stations replayed the courtroom footage endlessly. The child's innocent words, the dog's unmistakable reaction, the defendant's collapse under the pressure of truth. Across the country, people wept watching it. They called it the trial that touched America's heart. But for Lily, it was something simpler, a moment of truth, whispered by a child and confirmed by a loyal heart that never forgot his partner. And somewhere beyond the veil of this world, Officer Daniel Carter could finally rest, knowing justice was on its way. Morning sunlight filtered through the courthouse windows like pale gold ribbons, glinting off the polished oak benches. The air buzzed with subdued expectation. Everyone who'd witnessed yesterday's scene had returned, whispering about the toddler, the dog, and the accused man who'd nearly broken under a stare. Reporters lined the back row, pens ready, cameras tucked respectfully low. No one wanted to disturb the gravity of what was unfolding. Carter arrived early, her hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. She hadn't slept much. All night she'd replayed the sound of Max's growl, the shock in Mark's face, the collective hush that had swept the room. It had felt like Daniel himself was there, standing invisible between them, urging truth into the light. Max padded beside Officer Blake, calm but alert, his harness gleaming. As they passed the defense table, shrank slightly in his chair, pretending to read his notes. The man's once confident smirk was gone, dark circles ringed his eyes. Detective Sarah Monroe joined on the bench. "Forensics came in late last night," she whispered. "Paint fragments, microfibers, even trace blood. Everything matches truck. There's no denying it now." Gripped her friend's hand. "So it's really over." "Almost," Monroe said softly. "Today seals it." When Judge entered, the courtroom rose. His expression was firm but kind, the sort of demeanor that said he'd seen too much tragedy to take justice lightly. "Court is now in session," he said. "Prosecution may proceed." Rachel Goodman stood, composed and resolute. "Your Honor, the state would like to present the final forensic evidence in State v. Mark. These findings directly connect the defendant's vehicle to the hit-and-run that claimed Officer Daniel Carter's life." She turned to the jury, her voice clear. "Yesterday, you saw loyalty and innocence speak louder than any argument. Today, you will see science confirm what love already knew." A quiet murmur swept through the audience. A forensic analyst named Doctor took the stand, a thin woman with steady hands and eyes that missed nothing. "We recovered paint chips embedded in the officer's vest," she explained, projecting photos onto the courtroom screen. "These chips show identical chemical composition and color pattern to those found on the defendant's truck." She clicked to the next slide, a close-up of tire impressions. Additionally, skid marks at the scene match a unique tread defect on Mr.'s right front tire. This defect was confirmed by 3D modeling. It is a 1 in 10 million match. The defense lawyer rose wearily. "Doctor, could these similarities occur by coincidence?" Doctor smiled politely. "In theory, yes. In reality, no." Chuckles rippled through the courtroom before the judge tapped his gavel once. Rachel stepped closer. "Doctor, did you also analyze organic material found beneath the truck?" "Yes," the expert said. "There were traces of canine hair, consistent with K9 Max, and human tissue identified as belonging to Officer Carter. Both were found along the impact zone under the vehicle's front bumper." Gasped softly, covering her mouth. Even though she'd known, hearing it confirmed in sterile scientific language twisted something deep inside her. Lily looked up, confused by her mother's trembling. Max shifted beside them, resting his head on his knee as if sensing her pain. Doctor finished her testimony with calm authority. "In my professional opinion, there is a 0.01% chance these findings belong to any vehicle other than the defendant." Rachel turned toward the jury. "No further questions." When the defense declined to cross-examine, the judge leaned back. "Noted." He gestured toward the prosecution table. "Counselor, anything further?" Rachel hesitated, then said, "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to recall Officer Blake and K9 Max for one final identification procedure." The defense objected half-heartedly, but the judge overruled. "Proceed." Blake guided Max to the center of the room. The dog sat obediently, gaze fixed ahead. Rachel placed 2 sealed containers on the floor, one containing residue from the defendant's truck, the other from a control vehicle. "Max," Blake whispered, "seek." The German shepherd sniffed the first container, then moved to the second. He paused, then looked back toward the defendant's table, ears twitching. He didn't growl this time. Instead, he let out a short, low bark and sat, tail curling around his paws. Blake looked up. That's his confirmation signal. A murmur spread. The courtroom had witnessed enough. Science and instinct had aligned perfectly. Judge nodded slowly. "The evidence is admitted." For a moment, silence reigned. Then Rachel turned to face the jury, her voice trembling with controlled passion. "Ladies, and yesterday a child reminded us of what truth feels like. Today, every test, every photograph, every shred of data confirms it. Officer Carter died protecting a stranger. His sacrifice deserves not only remembrance, but justice." Her words hung in the air. Across the room, Mark's composure crumbled. He gripped the edge of the defense table until his knuckles whitened. Sweat beaded on his forehead. When his attorney tried to whisper something, jerked his arm away. Then he spoke, voice cracking. "I didn't mean to kill him. I panicked. I didn't see him until it was too late." Gasps erupted, cameras clicked. The judge struck his gavel hard. Order, order in the court. But the damage was done. The confession had slipped free like water through broken glass. Rachel turned slowly. "Mister, are you admitting that you struck Officer Carter with your vehicle on the night of May 14th? Covered his face with both hands. "Yes, I hit him. I was drunk, I freaked out, I drove off. I didn't want to go to prison." The judge's voice boomed. "Let the record show the defendant has made a voluntary verbal confession." Tears flowed freely now. She wasn't crying from anger anymore, just relief. A heavy, suffocating weight lifted from her chest. She reached down and hugged Lily, who clutched Max's collar. "See, Mommy," Lily said softly, "Daddy's friend found him." Those simple words echoed again through the quiet courtroom, and for the first time, everyone allowed themselves to smile through tears. The judge announced a brief recess before sentencing. Jurors whispered about courage, loyalty, fate. Officers embraced quietly in the back row. Detective Monroe walked to and placed a hand on her shoulder. "He would have been proud," she said. "You and Lily both." Managed a fragile smile. "I think he already knows." Outside, snow had begun to fall again, soft flakes drifting against the courthouse steps. The world seemed gentler, quieter. Stood beneath the awning, holding Lily close as reporters called her name, their questions blending into background noise. She didn't answer any of them. Instead, she looked up at the sky and whispered, "We did it, Danny. We found the truth." Max sat beside her, chest rising and falling steadily. When a single snowflake landed on his nose, he gave a soft sneeze that made Lily giggle for the first time in months. The sound cut through the cold like sunlight breaking through clouds. Detective Monroe joined them. "The department wants to hold a full memorial after sentencing," she said quietly. "A proper one. He deserves that." Nodded. "He does, and so does Max." Back inside, the judge reconvened. Sat slumped, no longer defiant. The jury foreman's voice was firm as he read the verdict. Guilty on all charges. Vehicular manslaughter, fleeing the scene, and obstruction. A wave of emotion rippled through the room. Some officers cried openly. Others saluted the photograph of Daniel Carter displayed beside the bench. Judge addressed the court. "Justice has been served not through vengeance but through truth, and through the unwavering loyalty of those who cannot speak, yet never lie." He glanced toward Max. "This court commends K9 Max for extraordinary service and devotion. Let it be recorded in the official transcript that his actions contributed materially to the administration of justice." A soft applause rose, restrained but heartfelt. Bent down beside Max, running her fingers through his fur. "You did it, boy," she whispered. "You kept your promise." The dog gave a small whine, pressing his head against her hand. Lily hugged him tightly, giggling again. "Daddy's happy now." And somehow believed it. When they stepped out into the winter afternoon, the courthouse bell chimed 12 times. Each toll felt like a heartbeat, slow, steady, alive. Snowflakes sparkled in Lily's hair as Max trotted proudly beside them, his leash slack, his spirit free. For the first time since that terrible night, Carter felt the ache in her chest ease. Justice had come, not just through the law but through love, loyalty, and a child's innocent truth. Somewhere in the quiet beyond the world's noise, Daniel Carter could finally rest. The courthouse emptied slowly after the verdict, but the weight of the day lingered in the air. Outside, snow continued to drift gently, blanketing the streets in pristine white. It was as if the world itself wanted to pause and honor what had been won, not only justice for Daniel Carter, but the emotional triumph of truth over fear, deceit, and despair. Carter held Lily's hand tightly as they walked down the steps, Max trotting beside them. The little girl's eyes were wide, her face flushed from the cold and the intensity of the day. "Mommy," she whispered, "Daddy's proud of us, isn't he?" Swallowed hard, a smile breaking through her tears. "Yes, sweetheart, he's very proud." She glanced down at Max, whose calm brown eyes reflected the satisfaction of a duty fulfilled. The German shepherd nudged her gently with his snout and laughed softly through her tears. "I think he knows it too." Detective Sarah Monroe approached, her face still tired but glowing with relief. "The department wants to hold a memorial ceremony for Daniel," she said. "We want the town to come together to honor him properly." Nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. He deserves that, more than anyone. In the days that followed, word spread quickly. The town of Together, organizing a memorial service that would celebrate Daniel's life, his courage, and the legacy he left behind. Local schools released students early, businesses closed for the day, and the streets were lined with residents holding candles, flowers, and signs that read, "Thank you, Officer Carter." Lily and Max arrived early, taking a quiet place at the front. The crowd's hum of whispers settled into silence as the ceremony began. A small stage had been erected, draped in blue and white ribbons. Photographs of Daniel, both in uniform and at home with his family, were displayed prominently. Detective Monroe spoke first. Daniel Carter was more than an officer. He was a friend, a protector, a father, and a husband. His bravery saved countless lives, and today, we honor him not just with words but with our presence, our memories, and our commitment to keep his spirit alive. The audience murmured in agreement. Children held small American flags, waving them gently in the winter air. Felt Lily's tiny hand squeeze hers, and she realized that even in grief, life persisted. The K-9 unit was called forward next. Max, wearing his polished harness, stood proudly at the front, his head held high. He had been recognized earlier in the courthouse footage for his instrumental role in identifying the suspect, and now he was being honored in person. The crowd erupted in applause, many wiping tears from their eyes. Officer Blake knelt beside Max, speaking softly. "You've done something extraordinary, buddy. You didn't just follow orders, you followed your heart." Max's ears twitched, and he gave a low, satisfied bark, earning laughter from some of the children nearby. Lily giggled, running forward to hug him, burying her face in his fur. Stood behind them, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride. The loyal dog who had once refused food and water, who had mourned alongside them in silence, had now become a living symbol of love, loyalty, and courage. The ceremony continued with a moment of silence. The crowd bowed their heads and a lone bugler played taps. The notes echoed across the snowy streets, hauntingly beautiful and impossibly sad. Felt her heart tighten, remembering the night she had learned Daniel was gone. But now, the sorrow was tempered with pride and hope. A local pastor gave the eulogy, focusing on Daniel's commitment to service, his love for his family, and the extraordinary bond he shared with Max. "In every act of bravery, we see the reflection of Daniel's heart," he said. "And in Max, we see the continuation of that heart, steadfast, loyal, and unyielding." Wiped tears from her cheeks. She had feared life would never be normal again, that the void Daniel left would be impossible to fill. But seeing the community, the K-9 unit, and even the youngest citizens recognize Daniel's legacy gave her a sense of closure she had thought impossible. After the ceremony allowed herself a rare moment of solitude. She knelt beside Daniel's photograph, pressing her forehead against the frame. "We did it, Danny," she whispered. "Justice was served, and Lily and Max, they helped too." The sound of paws on snow drew her attention. Max sat quietly beside her, resting his head on her knee. Lily came running up, holding a small bouquet of lilies, Daniel's favorite flower. "We made it nice for Daddy," she said proudly, placing the flowers carefully at the base of the photo. Embraced her daughter and whispered, "Yes, baby, you did. You both did." The news crews captured the moment, broadcasting it nationwide. The footage of Lily and Max together, innocent and loyal, moved viewers everywhere. Comments poured in on social media. Stories of courage, loyalty, and family touched millions. People were inspired not only by Daniel's bravery, but also by the way his family and Max had persevered. Back at home that evening, sat quietly in the living room with Lily and Max. The house, once filled with grief, now felt warmer, infused with memories of Daniel and the promise of new beginnings. She picked up the framed photograph of Daniel at his graduation from the academy. Lily watched as her mother traced the image with her fingers. "Mommy," Lily asked softly, "will Daddy always be with us?" Smiled, brushing her daughter's hair from her face. "Yes, sweetheart, not in the way we see, but in the way we feel. He's here in our hearts, in Max, and in every person who remembers him." Max, sensing the quiet reflection, rested his head on his lap. He had been Daniel's shadow, his partner in life and duty, and now he was the guardian of their family's memory. In the following weeks, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. Returned to work, bringing Lily along whenever she could. Max was no longer a silent mourner. He became a source of joy, guiding Lily to play outside, protecting her from imagined dangers, and reminding that life could continue even after tragedy. The story of the courtroom incident spread far and wide. Children wrote letters too, thanking her for sharing Lily's bravery. Police departments across the country sent gifts and letters, honoring Max's service and Daniel's sacrifice. Realized that their story had become more than a family's tragedy, it had become a beacon of hope. One evening, as she tucked Lily into bed, the little girl clutched Daniel's badge and whispered, "Max and I will make sure Daddy never gets lost." Kissed her forehead. "I know you will, baby, I know you will." Max, lying at the foot of the bed, lifted his head and let out a soft, approving whine. The bond between child and dog had grown unbreakable, a living testament to loyalty, love, and the strength to continue even when the world seemed unbearable. Months later, would attend a city council meeting where a memorial park was dedicated to Officer Daniel Carter. A statue of him and Max would stand at the entrance, immortalizing the partnership that had captured the hearts of an entire nation. Children would run past it, officers would salute it, and parents would tell stories of courage and devotion. And in quiet moments would stand beside Lily and Max, remembering the words her daughter had spoken in court, the two words that stunned everyone, "Daddy's friend." Those words had transcended the boundaries of grief, bridging generations, reminding everyone that love and loyalty do not end, they endure. Pressed her hand against Max's fur as they walked away from the park that day. The world felt lighter. The weight of grief was still there, yes, but balanced now with hope. And somewhere in the distance, she could almost feel Daniel smiling, proud of his daughter, proud of his wife, and proud of the dog who had never left his side. In that moment, understood something profound. Life could continue after loss, justice could be achieved, and love, fierce, loyal, and enduring, would always guide the way. The months that followed the trial were gentle in their own way, a slow unfolding of life that allowed Lily and Max to heal while keeping Daniel's memory alive. The grief, though never gone, had begun to settle into a quiet strength, a kind of resilience built on love, loyalty, and remembrance. The Carter home had changed subtly. Daniel's favorite chair, once untouched, now held a small blanket, a quiet tribute rather than a painful reminder. Photos of him smiling in uniform adorned the walls. Max, once a shadow of sorrow, had regained his confident stance, his paws carrying him with purpose through every room. Lily followed him wherever he went, chattering endlessly about her father, trusting the dog to carry some part of his presence with her. The Memorial Park Inn became a focal point for the community. A bronze statue of Daniel and Max stood near the entrance, Daniel kneeling with one hand on Max's head, a symbol of their bond that had captivated the town and later the nation. Families visited regularly, leaving flowers, letters, and small tokens of appreciation. Children were drawn to the statue, fascinated by the loyal K9, while adults remembered the courage it represented. Often visited the park, sometimes with Lily, sometimes alone. She would sit on the bench facing the statue, tracing her fingers over Daniel's name etched into the pedestal. Max would lie at her feet, ears twitching at every distant sound, still vigilant, still protective. One crisp spring morning, arrived at the park with Lily and Max. The air was fragrant with blooming flowers, and sunlight spilled across the pathways, warming the stone of the statue. Lily ran ahead, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers, her tiny hands clumsily arranging them at the base. "Daddy would love these," she said softly, smiling at Max. The dog nudged her gently, pressing his nose against her hand, as if confirming her words. Crouched beside her. "Yes, baby, he would, and he'd be proud of you too." She hugged her daughter tightly, feeling the warmth of life and hope rekindle within her. As they walked back home, reflected on the journey they had endured, the shock, the trial, the courtroom revelation, and the eventual conviction of Mark. She realized that justice had come not just through law enforcement or evidence, but through something deeper: the unyielding loyalty of Max, the courage of a 3-year-old, and the undying love of a family who refused to give up. The town continued to honor Daniel's legacy in small but meaningful ways. Schools invited to speak about bravery and civic duty, often sharing the story of Max and Lily in a way that inspired children to understand that heroism comes in many forms. Local officers held workshops with K9 units, teaching students how these animals serve alongside humans, their instincts often saving lives. One afternoon, received a letter from the police academy. It was an invitation for Max to attend a formal recognition ceremony for K9 officers nationwide. At first, she hesitated, but then she realized that it was exactly what Daniel would have wanted: for Max to be honored, to be celebrated, and to continue showing the world the remarkable loyalty of a service dog. The ceremony was a heartwarming sight. Max stood proudly beside, a ribbon of honor pinned to his harness. K9 units from across the country paraded, each dog showcasing their skills, dedication, and bond with their human partners. When Max's name was called, he walked to the stage with calm dignity, earning a standing ovation from the crowd. Eyes glistened with tears. The little girl who had once gestured in a courtroom now watched proudly, her tiny fingers intertwining with her mother. Afterward, reporters swarmed for interviews but deflected attention. "Max is more than a police dog," she said softly. "He's a part of our family, and he's been our guide through the hardest months of our lives." Back at home that evening, sat with Lily and Max on the living room floor. Lily held a photo of her father, her fingers tracing his face. "Mommy, do you think Daddy can see us from up there?" she asked innocently. Kissed her forehead. "I think he can, baby, and I think he's smiling." Max, sensing the gentle moment, rested his head on his lap. The three of them sat together in quiet peace, the shadows of grief finally tempered by love and memory. Weeks later, the town gathered for a community day at the Memorial Park, and Lily participated, welcoming families, sharing Daniel's story and showing children how Max had helped them through tragedy. The story of the courtroom incident, the 2 words spoken by Lily, the dog's reaction, had become legendary locally and beyond. Visitors marveled at the bond between child and dog, seeing in it a universal message of hope, courage, and loyalty. Even years later, would reflect on the lessons learned through loss. Daniel's death had been a tragedy of unimaginable magnitude, but it had also revealed something extraordinary: that love and courage do not end with life. Max's devotion had kept their family tethered. Lily's innocence had reminded everyone of truth's power, and herself had discovered a resilience she never knew she possessed. One spring evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, walked Lily and Max along the park path. The bronze statue gleamed in the fading light, casting long shadows across the blooming flowers. Lily stopped to place another small bouquet at the base. "Daddy would like these too," she said, smiling up at Max. crouched beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Yes, he would, and every time we come here we keep him alive in our hearts. Max nudged Lily gently with his nose, tail wagging slowly, laughed softly. I think he understands, baby. He really does. In that quiet moment, the world felt whole again. It was a world by tragedy but softened by memory, courage, and love. And while Daniel Carter would never walk beside them again, his presence lingered in every shared smile, in Max's loyal gaze, and in the fearless spirit of his daughter. Knew the story wasn't just theirs anymore. It belonged to the community, to the country, and to anyone who believed in justice, loyalty, and the extraordinary bond between humans and animals. She understood now that even in the darkest moments, hope could be found, sometimes in a child's words, sometimes in a dog's gaze, and sometimes in the quiet strength of those left behind to carry on. Years passed. Lily grew taller, still guided by Max on her daily walks to school. She spoke often of her father and the heroism he represented, continued her work in the community, advocating for families of fallen officers and raising awareness about the importance of K-9 units in law enforcement. Max, older but still vigilant, remained by their side, his unwavering loyalty an enduring testament to a bond that transcended loss. And every year, on the anniversary of that fateful night, Lily and Max would visit the memorial park. They would place fresh flowers at the base of the statue, kneel in silence, and remember Daniel, not with sorrow alone, but with pride, gratitude, and the comforting knowledge that his love had never left them. In those moments, always whispered to her daughter, "He's with us, Lily. In every brave act, in every kind gesture, in every loyal heart, he's always with us." Lily, clutching Max's fur, would nod solemnly. "I know, Mommy, and I'll never forget." Max, ever watchful, rested his head between them, eyes half closed yet alert. He had fulfilled his duty not only as a K-9 partner, but as a guardian of love, truth, and family. And in the quiet serenity of the park, amidst the whispers of wind through the trees, it was easy to believe that Daniel Carter's spirit smiled down upon them, proud, peaceful, and finally at rest. The world, though it would always remember the tragedy, had also learned the extraordinary power of loyalty, courage, and innocent truth. And for Lily and Max, life moved forward richer, fuller, and brimming with hope, carrying the legacy of a hero who would never be forgotten.